Document formats are wonderfully complex beasts. If you look at the number of permutations and combinations of how we can put together an Open XML document, it's more than the total number of possible chess games, I believe. Often when you are creating a document, if you create an invalid document, you can use the Open XML SDK productivity tool to tell you what is wrong with your document. You can use the validation functionality of that tool to tell you. Sometimes Word or Excel will tell you that there are problems with a document or a spreadsheet and will attempt to recover the data, but that doesn't necessarily help you. You don't want to recover the data, you want to generate a valid document. And sometimes you get this situation where Microsoft Excel has stopped working. I'm going to show you how I debug these types of problems in OpenXML development. I'm Eric White with OpenXML Developer, and this is going to be a pretty fun little deep dive into my approaches to debug a problem such as Excel crashing. Here's a question posed on OpenXML Developer. The question states that Bob has developed an application, he's included an image or included a graphic, and after including that graphic, if the user tries to print to the printer, then Excel crashes. Bob was kind enough to send a zip file that contains the document that causes Excel to crash. What's interesting is that in this particular case, if you open the document will open just fine. And if you save the document and reopen the document, again, it will open just fine. And in fact, if you go through that procedure, the document will print without crashing. It's only if you open the document and immediately try to print that Excel crashes. Well, that's an interesting problem. Let's take a look at how I solved this problem. I have validated that this is in fact the case, that this document causes Excel to crash. So the first thing that I do is I use the OpenXML SDK productivity tool and validate it just to see what's going on, see if that will give me any clues. I'll start the OpenXML SDK productivity tool, and I'm going to drag generated.xlsx onto the OpenXML SDK productivity tool. I'm running the 2.5 productivity tool. I'll click validate, and it tells me that there is no validation error in the package. That didn't help us. One thing that Bob stated is that it crashes when he put the image in there. So let's use the OpenXML package editor power tool for Visual Studio 2010, and let's go in and take a look at this spreadsheet. I'll open it. It looks kind of as you would expect. There's the workbook. It's got a couple of relationships. It's got a relationship to a single sheet. It also has a relationship to the styles part, and this sheet has its relationship to the drawing, and the drawing has a relationship to this image in the media folder. Let's go look around. I sometimes just come in here. I'll format the XML, and here's the worksheet, and here's a little teeny bit of data, and there's the page margins, and here's the element that contains the resource ID for the drawing. And so this is how the drawing gets put on top of this sheet. That's how drawings work in Excel, is they're sort of on top of the sheet. They're not really in a cell. They're just on top of the whole sheet itself. Well, let's do something first. Let's go ahead and let's delete this drawing altogether. So I'm going to exit without saving, and I'm going to copy and paste generated, and I'll call this hack1 delete drawing. And I'll drag hack1 delete drawing onto Visual Studio. First thing I'll do is come in here. I'm just going to delete that relationship, delete that node, come up here to the drawings part. I'll delete that relationship. And I'll delete the drawing.xml. I now don't have any relationships to this image.bin, so let's delete that fellow. And now we have a much simpler spreadsheet. Let's go back in and look at this sheet 1. Oh, I forgot to do one thing. Down here at the bottom, I have to delete this drawing element. We'll save it and close it. Let's open up Hack 1. It tells me that I've been crashing Excel. I certainly have been. So now let's come up here and go File, Print, and Excel has stopped working. So that wasn't the problem. Let's close this. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just simplify it even more. So I'm going to leave that one as it sits, and I'll rename this. I'll call this Hack 2 Further Simplify. Let's go edit this in Visual Studio 2010. Well, the next thing that I can do, what if there's a problem in the styles part? Let's just get rid of the styles part. Funny thing is, I can't remember. I don't work with Spreadsheet ML as much, and I can't remember. I believe that I can just delete this S attribute and get rid of the style reference in that cell. I come over here to the Open XML standard, look at section 18.3.1.4, and drop down here, and here is the S attribute, and it is indeed the style index. So I'll delete that fellow, and that one, and that one. So now I have a worksheet that has no references to styles. I can save that, and further I can come over here and I'll go to this workbook. I can delete the reference to the styles part, and I'll delete the styles part itself. We're getting pretty simple. So now I have a single workbook and a single worksheet. So let's see how this works out. Save everything. This is Hack 2, Further Simplify. It still opens, and sure enough, we can see our styles go away. So now let's try to print, and it still crashes. Let's close this, and now let's just look around just a little bit more. I'm going to look at the workbook, and the workbook is very simple. It has a single sheet in it. It has one of these resource IDs that are the type that the Open XML SDK generates. Is this R502E26260D-F8. Open XML SDK generates resource IDs more or less in the style of GUIDs. In other words, a large random number. And now let's look at our sheet markup. Well, we've got these page margins down here. They look okay. We've got the sheet data. It looks okay to me. Well, the next thing let's see is I don't know all the details of these elements up here. I'm just going to comment them out. So I do Control K, Control C. That's the keyboard bindings if you're using C# keyboard bindings to comment out any region of code. Let's save that. I left it as Hack 2 Further Simplify, so let's open this fellow again. I'm going to print this to my Snagit 11 pseudo printer. I don't need to actually waste paper on this. Well, that's interesting. It didn't actually print, but it didn't crash. So that's different. I wonder if it didn't print because I deleted all of that styling information. Not sure about that. But one of these elements here is causing my problem. So I am going to change my comments to put sheet format PR back into the mix. And I'll change this comment delimiter up here to put the dimension back in place. And so now all I have done is I've taken out the sheet views. Save it. I can open it. And I can go to File Print. So what it looks like to me is this sheet views element here. So basically what I've done is I've done a binary search, generally simplifying and simplifying this spreadsheet by hand until I got to the point where the spreadsheet doesn't crash. So my theory is it's this sheet views element that has its problem. So let's close down hack 2 and come back here. I'm going to copy, generate it, and paste it, and I'm going to rename it to hack 3 delete sheet views. And let's open up the worksheet, and I'm going to comment out sheet views. My worksheet opens up. It opens up and includes the image up at the top. So that image is the one that Bob thought was the problem. Let's now try to print it. I have a theory that the reason that I wasn't able to print to my Snagit printer is that one of those printer driver weirdnesses. So I've rebooted here. So now let's again go into hack 3 delete sheet views. And now I'll again try printing it to my Snagit printer. And there it printed. So I believe that I've figured out that that is the problem. So let's go look at that element again a bit more and see if we can understand what's going on. I'll drag hack 3 delete sheet views back to Visual Studio, the Open XML package editor in Visual Studio 2010. Let's go look at this sheet views and this sheet view element in the Open XML standard. Let's go to worksheets, and down here in this worksheet we should have a sheet views. Here's the sheet views element. If we look at our sheet views element, it contains a single sheet view element. And sure enough, sheet views contains a sheet view element right here. So let's click into there. And this sheet view element has tab selected equals 1 and workbook view ID is equal to 0. This tab selected indicates whether this sheet is selected. Only one sheet is selected and active, so that looks basically reasonable. And the other is this workbook view ID. And this is a zero-based index of this workbook view pointing to a workbook view element in the book views collection. That book views collection is up here in the workbook. Let's go take a look at that. And there is in fact no workbook collection. So my theory is that the problem is that this sheet view element points to a workbook in the workbook view that doesn't actually exist. It certainly is the case that if I delete that sheet views element, we can open it. I'm afraid I'm not as knowledgeable about Spreadsheet ML as I am about word processing ML. Spreadsheet ML is going to come along and be a focus at some point in time, but there's still too much to do in word processing ML for me right now. In any case, this is how I found this problem. You have this problem where Excel's crashing and you don't have an awful lot of information to tell you why it's crashing. So what you do is you go in and just start copying files and selectively going in and deleting things until you get to the point where your file will open. Now, if you are brand new to Open XML, you're not going to know as much. You're going to have to do a little bit of research to understand about which parts you can delete and how you actually have to delete them. But there's lots of resources out there to help you get started. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.